Jake Morrison pushed his cleaning cart down the empty hallway of Nexus Station's lower deck, the wheels squeaking with every rotation. The sound echoed off the metal walls, keeping him company like it had for the past 15 years. Third shift, 11 at night to 7 in the morning. Same route, same routine, same everything. He didn't mind it really. The station never slept, but during these hours it came close. The corporate bigwigs were tucked away in their fancy quarters on the upper levels. The traders and merchants had closed their shops. Even the bars in the entertainment district had dimmed their lights. Down here in the maintenance levels, it was just Jake, the steady hum of the air recyclers, and the occasional groan of the station's bones as it floated through space. Jake had gotten used to being invisible. People looked right through janitors like they were part of the furniture. He'd overheard million-credit deals while emptying trash cans. He'd mopped up after political arguments between alien ambassadors. Nobody noticed him, and that was fine. He had his podcasts, his paycheck, and his small corner of peace in a chaotic galaxy. He was emptying a trash bin near the cargo bay entrance when he heard it. A sound so soft he almost missed it over the hum of the station. A whimper like a kitten in distress, coming from somewhere in the shadows. Jake stopped and listened. There it was again, weak and desperate. He left his cart and followed the sound, weaving between stacks of cargo crates waiting to be loaded onto ships. The cargo bay was always a maze of boxes and containers, holding everything from medical supplies to luxury goods from 100 different worlds. Behind a stack of crates marked with alien symbols he couldn't read, Jake found something that made him freeze in place. A creature sat huddled in the shadows, no bigger than a football. Its scales shimmered black and silver in the dim emergency lighting, catching the light like precious gems. Small wings, delicate as paper, were folded tight against its trembling body. The creature was shaking either from cold or fear, maybe both. Two large eyes, far too intelligent and ancient for something so small, stared up at him with desperate hope. Jake had seen plenty of strange things working on an interstellar station. He'd cleaned up after visiting aliens with too many limbs, others with none at all. He'd gotten used to the weird and wonderful variety of life in the galaxy. But this was different. Then the creature spoke. Not out loud, but directly in his head like a voice inside his own thoughts. "Please? I'm cold. I just need somewhere to sleep." The voice was small, young, and absolutely terrified. Jake's breath caught in his throat. He'd seen enough galactic broadcasts to recognize what this was. A dragon. Not the fairy tale kind from Earth's old stories with knights and princesses, but a real one. The Draxians were famous across the galaxy. They ruled hundreds of planets, commanded fleets that could level worlds, and their royal family was practically untouchable. They were power incarnate, ancient and feared. And here was one, small and scared, hiding behind cargo crates like a lost puppy. Every instinct Jake had screamed at him to call security right now. This was way above his pay grade. This was the kind of situation that could get him fired, arrested, or worse. There were probably a dozen protocols for this exact scenario, and none of them started with "Janitor hides alien royalty in his closet." Important people were probably looking for this little guy. People with guns and ships and the authority to tear the station apart to find him. Getting involved would be the dumbest decision of his life. But Jake looked at those eyes, saw the way the small body shivered, and all he saw was a scared kid who needed help. "All right, little guy," he said softly, crouching down and opening his jacket. "Come here. Let's get you somewhere warm." The dragon didn't hesitate. It crawled forward on unsteady legs, its tiny claws clicking on the metal floor, and climbed into Jake's arms. Its body was ice cold despite the scales, like holding a bag of frozen marbles. The creature curled against his chest, tucking its head under his chin, and Jake felt it sigh with relief. The shivering started to ease just a little. Jake stood slowly, cradling the dragon like it was made of glass. He glanced at the security camera mounted in the corner of the cargo bay. The red light blinked steadily, recording everything. Someone would review this footage eventually. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, but they'd see it. "This is either the best thing I've ever done," Jake muttered to himself, "or the dumbest mistake of my entire life." He carefully tucked the dragon inside his jacket, zipping it up just enough to hide the small body but leave room for air. The dragon's mental voice whispered in his mind, barely audible. "Thank you." Jake grabbed his cleaning cart with one hand, keeping the other arm protectively over the small bulge in his jacket, and headed for his quarters. He had no plan, no idea what he was going to do after tonight, and no clue how to take care of a baby dragon. But he'd figure it out. He always did. Behind him, the security camera kept recording, its red light blinking into the empty cargo bay. Somewhere in the station's vast network, an alert was already being generated. The search would begin soon. But for now, Jake Morrison, third shift janitor, walked down the empty hallway with a dragon prince hidden against his heart, and somehow that felt exactly right. Jake's quarters were barely more than a converted storage closet tucked away in the station's forgotten corners. When he'd first taken the job 15 years ago, they'd apologized for the accommodations. Jake had just shrugged. It had a door that locked, a cot that didn't collapse, and it was his. That was enough. The room measured maybe 8 feet by 10. A narrow cot sat against one wall, covered with a thin blanket that had seen better days. A hot plate balanced on a plastic crate that served as his kitchen. A metal locker held everything he owned in the world, which wasn't much. But the heating worked and nobody bothered him here. He carefully set the dragon on his bed, and the small creature immediately curled into a tight ball, still shaking. Jake opened his locker and grabbed every blanket he owned, which was 3 in total. He piled them on the cot, shaping them into a makeshift nest with his hands. There you go, little guy. That better? The dragon crawled inside immediately, burrowing into the warmth like it was trying to disappear into the fabric. The shivering finally started to ease, and those large intelligent eyes blinked up at him with something that looked like gratitude. Jake sat down on the floor, giving the dragon space. So, you got a name? The voice in his head suddenly became much more formal. I am Prince Telone of the Draxian Empire, third heir to the Starfire throne, guardian of the celestial flames, keeper of... Whoa, okay, that's a mouthful, Jake interrupted, holding up his hands. How about I just call you Spark? Would that be all right? The dragon went quiet for a moment, tilting its head. Spark. Yeah. See, you've got these little sparks dancing across your scales when you move. Like tiny lightning bolts. It's pretty cool, actually. Spark seems to fit. For the first time, the dragon's mental voice carried something other than fear or formality. There was wonder in it, maybe even happiness. I like it. No one has ever given me a nickname before. Well, now you got one. Nice to officially meet you, Spark. I'm Jake. Over the next 3 days, Jake called in sick to work for the first time in 5 years. His supervisor sounded shocked on the phone. Jake Morrison never called in sick. He was the guy who showed up early and stayed late. But Jake told them he had the flu and needed a few days, and they reluctantly agreed. He stayed hidden in his quarters with the door locked, watching the dragon slowly recover. Spark slept a lot at first, curled up in the nest of blankets. When he was awake, he was hungry. Constantly hungry. Jake shared everything he had. Instant noodles from packets that cost 50 cents each. Protein bars that tasted like cardboard. Synthetic chicken from the cheap dispensary down the hall. Spark ate it all ravenously, despite claiming between bites that such food was beneath royalty and not fit for a prince. Yeah, well, it's what I got, Jake said, slurping his own noodles. If you want fancy food, you're bunking with the wrong guy. But Spark never really complained. He seemed amazed by everything, even the terrible food. What is this flavor called? He'd ask. Or, why is it shaped like this? Every meal was an adventure for him. When they weren't eating, Jake talked. He told Spark stories about Earth, about the planet he'd left behind 20 years ago to find work in space. He described baseball games on summer nights, the crack of the bat and the smell of hot dogs. He talked about thunderstorms rolling across the Midwest, the way the sky would turn green before a tornado. He told Spark about his grandmother's apple pie, made from scratch every Sunday, and how he'd never found anything in the galaxy that tasted half as good. Spark listened to everything with intense fascination, his eyes never leaving Jake's face. He asked questions about concepts he'd never encountered before. What were friendship bracelets? Why would anyone want a snow day? What was a movie marathon, and why would you watch the same characters for hours? Your people don't have any of this? Jake asked, surprised. No hanging out with friends? No lazy weekends? Spark's mental voice grew quieter, sadder. My people have power, territory, ancient honor. We have war councils and diplomatic meetings and ceremonies that last for days. But no one ever asked me what I wanted for dinner, or tucked me in at night, or called me anything but Your Highness or Young Prince. Everything was about duty and tradition and preparing to rule. That sounds lonely, Jake said softly. It was, Spark admitted. I never had a choice in anything. Not what I ate or wore or studied or who I spent time with. Every moment was scheduled. Every word I spoke was corrected. I felt like a thing being polished, not a person being raised. Jake reached over and gently scratched behind the dragon's small horns, the way you might pet a cat. Spark's eyes closed and he made a sound like a purr, a deep rumble in his chest. Well, you're safe here, buddy. No ceremonies, no schedules. Just us. Spark was quiet for a long moment. Then his voice came again, uncertain. Jake. Something's happening. I can feel you. Your emotions. When you're happy, I feel warm inside. When you're worried, I feel it too. It's getting stronger every hour. Is that bad? Jake asked, concerned. It means I've chosen you, Spark said quietly. Draxian young bond with their protector for life. It's supposed to be someone from our own kind, someone chosen by our parents. But I didn't mean to bond with you. Just happened. I felt safe with you and my instincts took over. You're mine now. And I'm yours. Forever. Jake swallowed hard, the weight of that settling on his shoulders. Kid, I clean toilets for a living. I live in a storage closet. I don't think I'm qualified to be bonded to alien royalty. But you're kind, Spark said simply. That's more than I ever had. Before Jake could respond, the door alarm blared so loud it made them both jump. Heavy fists pounded on the metal. Security. Open up right now. Jake's heart dropped into his stomach. He looked at Spark, then at the door. There was no time to think. He grabbed Spark, tucked him inside his jacket, and ran for the maintenance shaft in the corner of his room. Jake sprinted through the maintenance tunnels like his life depended on it, because it probably did. Spark was clutched to his chest, the small dragon's claws digging into his shirt. Behind them, the sound of boots pounding on metal grating echoed through the narrow passages. Security was close, too close. These tunnels were Jake's world. He'd walked them 1,000 times, knew every turn and shortcut. He'd fixed leaking pipes here, cleared blocked vents, dragged bags of trash through these passages when the main corridors were too crowded. Now that knowledge was the only thing keeping them ahead of armed guards. Left here, he gasped, ducking into a service shaft that most people didn't even know existed. He had to squeeze through sideways, his shoulders scraping against the wall. Spark pressed tighter against him, trying to make himself smaller. The dragon's voice filled his head, sad and resigned. They're getting closer, Jake. You should leave me. Save yourself. You've done enough. Not happening, Jake panted, stumbling forward. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but he kept moving. You'll be arrested. Or worse. I'm not worth this. Let me decide what you're worth, kid. Jake burst out of the tunnel into the lower cargo bay, the same place he'd found Spark 3 days ago. For a moment he thought they'd made it. Then he saw the armed guards positioned at every exit. 6 of them, maybe more, all carrying weapons that could drop him before he took 2 steps. His heart hammered in his chest as he backed against the wall. There was nowhere left to run. The guards advanced slowly, weapons raised, their faces hidden behind helmets. Sir, put down the creature and step away, one of them ordered. Nobody has to get hurt. Jake's mind raced. He looked around desperately and that's when he saw it. Mounted on the wall near the main cargo doors was the emergency broadcast panel, the one used for station-wide announcements during disasters. It was covered in warnings and safety labels, only supposed to be used by command staff. Jake had never broken a rule in 15 years of working here. He showed up on time, did his job, stayed out of trouble. But looking at that panel, he realized there was a first time for everything. Spark, trust me on this. Before anyone could stop him, Jake lunged for the panel and slammed his hand on the broadcast button. Alarms blared. Every screen on Nexus Station flickered to life, from the fancy restaurants on the upper levels to the dive bars in the entertainment district. Thousands of people suddenly saw the same image. A janitor in a dirty uniform holding a small dragon surrounded by armed guards. Jake looked directly into the camera. His voice shook, but he forced himself to speak clearly. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm nobody important. I clean floors on the 3rd shift. 3 days ago, a kid asked me for help. He was cold and scared and alone, hiding behind some cargo crates. I didn't ask who his parents were or what empire he belonged to. I just did what any decent person would do. I helped him. He could see the guards exchanging uncertain glances. One of them was speaking urgently into his radio. Now everyone's hunting him, Jake continued. Security, bounty hunters, politicians. They're treating him like he's cargo. Like he's property to be returned or traded around. But he's not. He's a child who deserves to be protected, not used as a political tool by people who see him as an asset instead of a person. Spark's mental voice was panicked. Jake, what are you doing? Something really stupid or really brave? Haven't decided yet. Jake squared his shoulders and stared into the camera. So here's what's gonna happen. Anyone who wants him has to go through me first. I made a promise to keep him safe and I don't break my promises. Not for security, not for politics, and not for anyone. The guards had lowered their weapons slightly, unsure what to do with a janitor making a galaxy-wide speech. One of them was definitely getting yelled at by someone on the radio. Then the entire station shook. It wasn't like the gentle vibrations when ships docked. This was violent, sudden, like a massive fist had slammed into the hull. Alarms started blaring from every direction. The lights flickered. People screamed in distant corridors. Jake looked out the nearest viewport and felt his stomach drop. A warship had materialized right outside the station. Not just any warship. This thing was massive, easily 3 times the size of the station itself. Its hull was sleek and black, like it had been carved from a single piece of midnight. Weapons bristled along its surface, enough firepower to vaporize the entire station and everything around it. The ship's presence felt like a physical weight, like gravity itself had intensified. Every screen on the station went dark. Then they all lit up at once with a single image, a dragon so large and terrifying that Jake's brain struggled to process it. She was covered in deep blue scales that gleamed like polished metal. Her eyes burned like dying stars. When she spoke, her voice came through every speaker on the station, ancient and powerful enough to make the walls vibrate. "Human, release my son. Now." The guards all dropped to their knees, their weapons clattering to the floor. Even through their helmets, Jake could tell they were terrified. The Draxian Queen had arrived and she did not look happy. Jake held Spark a little tighter, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. The small dragon trembled against his chest. "Well," Jake muttered, "this is about to get interesting." She materialized right in the middle of the cargo bay in a shimmer of light that hurt to look at. One moment there was empty space, the next moment she was there, and Jake's brain struggled to process what he was seeing. The Queen was 15 feet tall, maybe more. Her body was covered in midnight blue scales that gleamed like polished metal under the cargo bay lights. Each scale looked sharp enough to cut steel. Her wings, folded against her back, stretched wider than a small spacecraft. Her eyes burned like stars, ancient and impossibly intelligent, holding the weight of thousands of years behind them. She was beautiful and terrifying in equal measure, like watching a hurricane form right in front of you. Every person in the cargo bay dropped to their knees instantly. The guards, the dock workers who'd been watching, even people in the observation galleries above. They all knelt, pressing their foreheads to the ground, trembling. Jake stayed standing. His legs wanted to fold. Every survival instinct in his body screamed at him to kneel, to run, to do anything except stand there holding her son. But he'd made a promise and Jake Morrison didn't break promises. The Queen took one massive step forward, her claws clicking on the metal floor. The sound echoed like thunder. She lowered her enormous head until her eyes were level with Jake's, and he could feel the heat radiating from her body. "You dare hold my heir against his will?" Her voice rumbled through the cargo bay like an earthquake. Jake's mouth was dry, but he forced himself to speak. "I'm not holding him against anything. Spark makes his own choices." He looked down at the small dragon in his arms. "Spark, you want to go with her? It's okay if you do. She's your mom. I won't be mad." The little dragon trembled in his arms. Jake could feel waves of fear and confusion through their bond. Spark looked at his mother, at the towering figure of power and majesty, and then pressed closer to Jake's chest, his small claws gripping tighter. Mother, I'm sorry." Spark's mental voice was barely a whisper, but it echoed through everyone's minds in the cargo bay. "But I choose him. He's bonded to me now. I can't leave him." The Queen's eyes widened in shock. Then they narrowed dangerously, and the temperature in the cargo bay seemed to rise 10 degrees. "A human?" Her voice was ice and fire combined. "My son, my heir, third prince of the Draxian Empire, has bonded to a human?" The way she said human made it sound like an insult. Jake swallowed hard. "Look, Your Majesty, I get that I'm not what you had in mind for a royal babysitter. I'm about as far from qualified as you can get. But your kid was dying in a cargo bay 3 days ago, alone and freezing. I was the one who stopped to help. That bond thing? He says it's real and I can feel it too. I can feel him in my head right now. And I made him a promise to keep him safe. You have no idea what you've done." The Queen's voice was deadly quiet now, which was somehow worse than her anger. "The soul bond is sacred. Ancient. It cannot be broken, not by distance, not by time, not even by death. You have tied yourself to my son for the rest of your life. Perhaps for the rest of eternity. Do you understand what that means?" "Then I guess you're stuck with me," Jake said. His voice only shook a little. Silence fell over the cargo bay. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone watched, barely breathing, as the Queen stared at this human janitor who just talked back to her. Then she spoke, her voice like grinding stone. "Prove you are worthy. Face the trial of flames." Before Jake could ask what that meant, a circle of fire erupted around him. Not regular fire. Draction fire. The flames burned blue-white, so hot that the metal floor beneath them started to glow red. The air itself seemed to scream. Jake had once seen this kind of fire used to cut through a starship hull in seconds. "Jake, no. You'll die." Spark's voice was pure panic in his head. "It's okay, buddy." Jake's hands were shaking. "I knew what I signed up for." That was a lie. He'd had no idea. But it was too late now. Jake stepped into the flames. The pain was instant and overwhelming, like every nerve in his body was being torn apart. His skin blistered immediately. The heat was so intense he couldn't breathe, couldn't think. He gritted his teeth and kept walking forward, one agonizing step at a time. His vision blurred from the pain and the tears evaporating from his eyes before they could fall. He could hear people shouting, but it sounded distant, underwater. His legs wanted to give out. Every cell in his body begged him to stop. Then Spark screamed. It was an actual sound, high and piercing, the first noise Jake had heard him make aloud. The little dragon leaped from his arms and wrapped his small body around Jake's head. His wings spread wide, covering Jake's face and shoulders like a shield. The flames couldn't touch Jake anymore. Spark was shielding him, taking the fire himself. "Kid, no." Jake tried to pull him away, but Spark held tight. "You protected me." Spark's voice was filled with determination Jake had never heard before. "Now I protect you. That's what family does." The little dragon, barely large enough to fly, roared defiance at his own mother's trial. His scales were blackening from the heat, but he didn't let go. The queen watched her son sacrifice himself for a human janitor. Something changed in her ancient eyes. The flames died instantly. Silence fell. Then the queen, ruler of half the known galaxy, knelt before them both. Her massive form bowed, her head lowered in respect. "Rise, Jake Morrison," she said softly. "Guardian protector of Prince Talon. You have earned your place." The news spread across the galaxy in hours. A human had been granted Draction nobility. Not just any human, but a janitor from a backwater space station who made minimum wage and lived in a storage closet. The story was everywhere. News networks ran it on repeat. Social media exploded. Half the galaxy thought it was a joke. The other half couldn't stop talking about it. Jake stood on the Queen's flagship, still wearing his janitor uniform because it was literally all he owned. The ship was massive, bigger than anything he'd ever seen up close. The walls were made of some kind of dark crystal that seemed to absorb light. Everything hummed with power. He felt completely out of place. Spark perched on his shoulder, already twice the size he'd been a week ago. The little dragon who'd fit inside Jake's jacket now had to drape himself across Jake's shoulders like a scaly scarf. He was growing fast, getting stronger every day, but he still refused to leave Jake's side for more than a few minutes. "What happens now?" Jake asked the Queen. They stood on the observation deck, watching stars streak past as the ship traveled faster than light itself. The Queen was quiet for a long moment, her massive form still intimidating even when she wasn't trying to be. "Now," she finally said, "you teach us something we have forgotten. My people have ruled through power for millennia. We conquered worlds. We built an empire that spans half the known galaxy. But we have lost something along the way." "What's that?" Jake asked. "Connection. Compassion. You showed my son kindness expecting nothing in return. You risked your life for him when you had every reason to walk away. That is rare. Especially among those with power." Jake shrugged. "I just did what anyone should do." "But they don't," the Queen said softly. "That's the problem." Over the following months, Jake's life changed in ways he never could have imagined. He traveled to the Draction homeworld, a planet of crystalline mountains and cities that floated in the clouds. The first time he saw it from space he actually cried. It was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. The Draction nobles didn't know what to make of him. Here was this human in worn-out clothes who ate with the wrong utensils and didn't understand half their customs. But he was bonded to a prince, and the Queen had declared him guardian protector, so they had to accept him. Spark grew larger and stronger with each passing week, but he never strayed far from Jake's side. The dragon learned human customs with the same fascination he'd shown in that tiny storage room. Jake taught him board games and Spark became obsessed with chess. He learned terrible dad jokes and would repeat them to confuse Draction nobles. He insisted on saying please and thank you, which apparently wasn't common among royal dragons. "Your Highness, you don't need to thank servants," one noble told Spark. Jake says everyone deserves respect, no matter their job, Spark replied. If Jake's right about everything else, he's probably right about this too. And Jake taught other Dractions what he'd taught Spark. That strength wasn't just about fire and claws and conquered territory. Real strength was choosing to help when you didn't have to. It was admitting when you were wrong. It was being kind even when nobody was watching. The Queen established an exchange program between Earth and the Draxian Empire. Humans came to learn about advanced technology, interstellar politics, and ancient history. Draxians went to Earth and discovered things they'd never imagined. They learned about friendship, the kind that wasn't based on power or politics. They tried pizza for the first time and couldn't believe humans had invented something so perfect. They learned about second chances, about how humans believed people could change and grow. One Draxian noble spent 3 months working in a soup kitchen in Chicago. She came back transformed, talking about the dignity of service and the strength and humility. Another learned to play guitar from a street musician in New Orleans and wrote songs that became hits across the empire. 5 years passed. Jake was still Jake, just with fancier clothes now and a lot more responsibility. He'd gained weight from all the good food, and his hair had gone gray at the temples from stress. But he smiled more than he ever had working third shift on Nexus Station. He sat in the palace gardens on a warm afternoon watching Spark, now the size of a horse, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian, teaching young dragons a game called baseball. Spark was pitching, using his tail to throw the ball. The young dragons were terrible at it, but they were laughing, which apparently was also something Draxian nobles didn't used to do much. A small dragon, barely a month old, approached Jake shyly. "Guardian Jake? Can you tell the story again? About the night you met Prince Talon?" Jake smiled and pulled the young one close, letting her curl up in his lap. "Sure, kid. Come here." Other young dragons noticed and gathered around, settling on the grass. Some of them Jake had known since they hatched. They loved this story, asked for it at least once a week. "So there I was," Jake began, pushing my cleaning cart down the empty hallway, minding my own business. It was 3 in the morning and I was thinking about what I'd have for breakfast, when I heard this little voice asking for somewhere to sleep. The young dragons listened with wide eyes, even though they'd heard it before. Spark stopped his baseball game and came over, settling his large form behind Jake like a living wall, listening to the story of his own rescue. One janitor had seen a child instead of a prince. One act of kindness, offered without thinking about rewards or consequences, had changed everything. It had changed Jake's life, Spark's life, and somehow, it had started changing how 2 entire civilizations saw each other. And the galaxy was better for it. Because sometimes, the most important thing you can do is help someone who needs it, even when it doesn't make sense, even when it's scary, even when you're just a janitor who cleans floors for a living. Especially then.